What's going on, traders? We got a few things to talk about. You're not going to want to miss this, so let's get straight into it. So right now we're looking at the triple Qs, and I told you guys in the last video that I think the triple Qs is going to head towards 493, and then the SPY is going to head to 575. It went actually a little bit higher than 575, about 577, 578, give or take. And yeah, that's great and all, but we just haven't gotten that reaction from the overall market, at least in the big tech side. Sure, Apple went higher, but we really didn't see anything from Nvidia. We didn't get any life from Tesla. It was just a really boring day in regards to the Mega 7. And so what happens from here? What are we really waiting on? Well, maybe we're waiting on the CPI data tomorrow, sure. And if you don't know, let's actually look at it. Tomorrow we have CPI, I believe, at around 8:30 Eastern. That's usually the time. Yeah, so 8:30 Eastern we have CPI data and unemployment claims. Maybe the market is waiting on that. I mean, we didn't get much of a reaction from the data that we got today. So it's safe to say that the market is waiting on this news tomorrow, and then hopefully we get some type of reaction. But what happens when we do get that data tomorrow if we're just simply looking at TA? Well, I told you guys that this upside is very limited right now when we're talking about the NQ, ES, triple Qs. And we're going to come to some type of conclusion towards the end of the video on what are we looking at here. And so we look at the daily time frame on the triple Qs, we hit that 493 target, and we're pretty much at resistance right now. We rejected here, we rejected here, and if we zoom out, if we just so happen to break higher and break above that 493 level and just so happen to head higher, let's actually zoom out so you guys can see where this other trend is coming from in case you're new to the YouTube channel, right? We rejected here a billion times. We played games here, we did our little roller coaster, had our little bull trap here, retested, and now we're back here once again. And so what happens from here? Well, it's important to note that on the 4-hour time frame, when we're looking at the triple Qs, we still have a little more upside in regards to the RSI, right? We go down to the 2-hour time frame, we're overbought. Okay, we're overbought. And like I said in the last video, I wouldn't take being overbought on smaller time frames too seriously. I usually take it serious when it's like the 4-hour daily and up. But again, we're still overbought, so that is something to note. Now, what's important here is that we do have fair value gaps to the downside in regards to the triple Qs. We have a fair value gap all the way to 490 that needs to be mitigated. We have another one all the way at 485 that needs to be mitigated. So if we are looking at a dip, which I do think is going to happen between tomorrow and Friday, I do think we're going to get some type of sell-off. I would imagine that these are the targets that we're looking forward to, the 490 and the 485, 484 range. All right, and then after that, we'll have to see what happens. And so we look at the SPY, and the SPY is also overbought as well. Now, the SPY looks a little bit more bullish here and looks like it could potentially see more upside. But again, the SPY is overbought when we're talking about the smaller time frames. Now, we go to the 4-hour time frame as well. Still have a little more space to the upside in regards to the RSI, but we do have fair value gaps that need to be mitigated to the downside. We have one all the way at 575, 573, give or take, and then we have some that's just way down in Narnia. We're not going to talk about those right now, but we do have some in the 550s range, which I do think is going to happen sometime this month. Between this month and beginning of November, we're going to see that massive drop down to these fair value gaps and start mitigating those. But again, when we're talking about the SPY and we're talking about the triple Qs, sure, we broke above these areas, but like I said in the last video, what if we're looking at another scenario where bulls get trapped like we saw here, where we break above this area, we get overbought on the 4-hour and 4-hour time frames and below, and we get very overbought, and then bulls get trapped. And so what leads me to believe that this might be a bull trap? Right, what really is leading me to have this thought process? Now, originally it was I was very reserved about this thought process, but then I started looking at the futures. Right, we look at the NQ, and we see on the NQ we're at that area that I told you guys about in the last video. We rejected here, there's wicks here that's rejecting here. Hopefully you guys can see that. You can look for yourself, of course, but on the daily time frame, you're rejecting here, and now you're back at this trend all over again. You go to the 4-hour time frame so you can get a better view, and look what's happening on the 4-hour time frame. We're overbought. So let's do the math here. Triple Qs is not overbought on a 4-hour time frame, nor is it even close to overbought on a daily time frame. NQ, however, is overbought on a 4-hour time frame. Now, on a daily time frame, NQ, granted, still has more space to the upside, but we're talking about the 4-hour. We're talking about even the 2-hour on NQ. We're pretty overbought here. We're really overextended. And so again, we go back to the triple Qs. Sure, we're overbought on a 2-hour time frame, but on a 4-hour, we're not. So, what does this mean? Well, if the futures are showing one thing, but the triple Qs are showing a different thing, if the triple Qs pumps much higher, while NQ can pump higher, of course, it's going to get more overbought, and that's leading me to believe that a bull trap is coming. Because we're seeing two different things. Maybe you don't believe me. Fine. Let's go to the ES. We see on the ES, overbought on the 4-hour time frame. I mean, extremely overbought, right? It's very overextended when we're talking about the ES. But when we looked at the SPY, we're going back to the SPY here, we're not nowhere near overbought. And so if we do continue to pump, right? If we pump further up to the upside, which I do think is going to happen, I think we're going to get an initial pump and then possibly a dump type scenario. And we'll go further into why I think that, further along in the video. But again, the SPY is not overextended, but the ES is overextended on the 4-hour time frame, thus leading me to believe that a bull trap is coming. And this is how you kind of get an idea on when traps are going to happen. Now, granted, things still look great. Things still look fine. I do think the ES has more room to the upside. I'm looking at about 58.80, 58.88, somewhere around there as a possible target. But if we continue to go up and we get this, good news tomorrow, CPI, whatever the case may be, we get unemployment data, and we pump further to the upside, it's going to get a lot more overextended. And then what happens when the SPY hits about 580, 585, and the ES is extremely overextended? Whatever pullback we're going to get is going to be absolutely evil. Okay, it's going to be destructive. Okay, so I want you guys to really keep these things in mind. Again, we're overextended on the ES, we're overextended on the NASDAQ, but the triple Qs and the SPY are not reflecting that. This is why I think a bull trap is on the way. But fine, you still don't believe me, right? Look at Bitcoin. What is Bitcoin doing here? Bitcoin is dropping the whole time while the market is, part of the market, I guess, the futures and the ETFs are going higher. But what is Bitcoin doing? Bitcoin is dropping the whole time while this is happening. And one thing I used to not believe is that Bitcoin was a leading indicator, but this was before Bitcoin had an ETF or even stocks within the market. But now that Bitcoin has an ETF in the market, it has an actual foot in the market, we can use this as a leading indicator, and so far it hasn't failed me. It shows that a drop is coming. Because why? It's been dropping this entire time. But this is where things get really interesting. Stick with me here. We're oversold on Bitcoin 4-hour time frame. So if we do drop tomorrow, right? Let's say I'm not saying it's going to happen right away. Okay. Let's say we drop tomorrow, sometimes towards the afternoon or something like that, right? But during that time, because again, we saw the market go up today while Bitcoin was dropping the whole time. And let's say the market drops or whatever the case may be, it plummets, and then we start to see Bitcoin going up. Is the market going to set up a bear trap at that point? So it's very interesting. So what I'm looking at right now is that, one, I think a bull trap is coming, but after that bull trap, as crazy as it's going to sound, as ridiculous as it's going to sound, if Bitcoin starts to recover, and I mean have a huge recovery to the upside while the market is dumping, if the market dumps, okay, if the market dumps and Bitcoin starts to do the opposite of the market like it did today, I think we're looking at, one, a bull trap first, and then two, depending on how aggressive the drop is, which I think it might be aggressive, we might see some type of flash crash, if anything. If Bitcoin recovers during this process, we could be looking at a bear trap right after that. Okay, so Bitcoin is very interesting here. Again, we're looking at the 4-hour time frame, and we're overextended to the downside on the 4-hour time frame. We're also at this trend right here on Bitcoin. So it's very, very interesting just how things are playing out right now. So in case I lost you a bit here, what I'm saying is that, one, NQ and the ES, when we're looking at the 4-hour time frame, we're very overextended to the upside on these time frames. But when we look at the triple Qs and the SPY, we're not overextended on the time frames. We're not overextended on the 4 hour. We're overextended on the 2 hour, sure, but in regards to the 4 hour and the daily time frame, we're completely fine. We're sitting pretty, right? And so we have to really think, what does this mean? If the triple Qs continues to go up and the SPY goes further up, which is very much possible, what positions does that put the NQ and the ES in? They're going to get very much more extended, and that makes the pullback that can happen that more deadly, right? Now, again, what do we see today? We saw Bitcoin drop the whole time. The whole time, Bitcoin has been dropping. While the market has been going up majority of the week, we've seen Bitcoin just continuously drop to the downside. And so this leads me to believe that Bitcoin is pretty much warning us that a drop is coming. Why? Because Bitcoin has leverage in the actual stock market. It has an ETF. It has, stocks like Coin, Riot, Marathon, Mara, whatever you call it, right? It has assets. It's pretty much a leading indicator in the stock market. It has a foot in the game, and it hasn't failed yet. Anytime Bitcoin goes up, typically a day or two later, the market goes up and follows along. So what if Bitcoin is warning us that something is coming? And when we're doing the math and we're talking about NQ and ES being overextended, could Bitcoin be the confirmation that overextension is going to lead to a major drop? Sure, okay, fine. Maybe that's not enough. We look at the VIX. So the VIX is getting close, right? It took its time, but it's getting close. And what did we talk about in our last video in regards to VIX? This gap fill, right? We talked about this gap fill. And so this is why I think that a bull trap is coming, all right? Maybe I'm wrong. Who knows? But right now, this is leading me to believe if we're adding everything I just set up together, are we looking at a possible bull trap coming? I think it's very much possible. I think the news tomorrow is going to possibly send the market to the moon, and then we get a huge drop depending on how overextended we are. So these are two things I want you guys to pay attention to. I want you to pay attention to the VIX. If we fill this gap up on the VIX, right? We fill this gap on the VIX at around, I want to say 19.2, 19.3, somewhere around that range, right? We mitigate this fair value gap. There's a fair value gap down here at the $17 range, but like I always say, gaps have very strong support and resistance, so I'm not counting on this to happen right away. It very much can, but I don't think it will. I think if anything, this fair value gap is going to motivate the next bull rally, which I think is very much still possible and on the table, which is why I'm talking about a possible bear trap happening if the market does drop between tomorrow and Friday. So again, pay attention to the VIX 4-hour time frame. There's a gap here. If we fill this gap tomorrow morning, I would be very careful. Okay, I will be very careful. If we fill this gap tomorrow morning, pay attention to if one, the NQ is still overextended. Two, if the ES is still overextended. And by that point, if this gap is filled, we want to see if the triple Qs and the SPY is overextended at that point. If that's the case, I think we have the perfect formula for a massive drop. All right, I think that's going to be the perfect formula. Now, don't get me wrong. After that drop, I do think if the VIX doesn't do one of these moves and just start heading all the way to the 17s, if we start to recover on the VIX, right? We start to recover on the VIX, we start heading towards that $25 target that we were talking about in the last video that some whale is playing off of. If we start heading towards here and we leave this fair value gap open down here, I think that's going to be the sign that another rally is going to happen, and it's going to be absolutely massive. Okay, that the next rally is going to be ridiculous to the upside. So those are the things I want you guys to pay attention to. If Bitcoin starts recovering, let's say tonight it just starts recovering, right? I want you to pay attention to that, because if that happens and Bitcoin starts recovering, I think that's a sign on the next bull rally is going to happen probably next week. Okay, I think towards the middle of October 18th to October 20th, I think we're going to get one more major rally, and then I think that's when things are going to get real. Okay, we'll see. But I do think a drop is coming, probably between tomorrow and Friday. After that drop, I do think that a bear trap is on the table. So one, I think a bull trap is on the table first, and then it's going to be a bear trap. We've seen this all the time. The market keeps trapping both sides, but this time I think there's going to be an actual real move behind it. We look at the triple Qs once again. And so I think this will be perfect. So let me give you guys an idea on what I'm looking at. So we can get rid of this right now, for now at least. And so let's say we break higher, right? If the triple Qs breaks out of this area right here and does one of these moves and heads towards 496, because I don't think 500 is going to get broken this week. I just don't. I will be extremely surprised that happens. I don't think 500 is going to be the move this week. If triple Qs does one of these moves, that would be good for the bulls. But if it immediately rejects from here, then I think that's a pretty bad sign short term for the bulls. So we'll see. So let's look at these semiconductor ETFs. So first up, we're going to look at SMH. Right, so we zoom out, and as you guys can see, we're looking at the 4-hour time frame. We rejected here, we rejected here, we rejected here as well. I didn't mark it, but hopefully you guys can see that. We rejected here as well. Let's actually pull up our RSI. So we're not yet overextended, right? And then we go to our, and we're possibly looking at a rejection here. It's not yet clear, but we are somewhat rejecting here, so that could be signs of a drop coming. But as you guys can see, this is what I was talking about in the last video, and we're on the daily time frame, by the way. We're starting to head towards overextended territories on SMH. But what's important to notice here is this fair value gap up here that needs to be mitigated all the way to about the 270s range. And so I do think that if SMH is going to start heading towards 270, then that's when NVIDIA is going to start heading towards 140. I think that's a no-brainer. I don't think I need to tell you guys that. And so we have a low here, higher low here, higher low here. And so what I'm counting on right now is either we break out of here or we reject from this point on. Okay, so that is what I want you guys to pay attention to. But on a daily time frame, we're starting to head towards overextended territories. So if we start to just push, and I mean just really, really push to the point of no return, we start heading towards 270s. That pullback that's going to happen, and I mean it's going to be evil. Okay, it's going to be absolutely evil. We look at SOXX. Again, we're heading towards resistance. We got a little more space to the upside on the RSI on SOXX, but we're looking at the daily time frame here. We rejected here, we rejected here, we rejected here. We're heading towards this area. We're pretty much in this fair value gap. There is a gap that needs to be filled all the way to 242s. But mind you guys, I've been talking about this 250 target. I still think SOXX is going to head towards 250. Now, an ideal move would be we reject from here almost immediately. We go lower, or we just somehow go to 227, bounce off 227 and possibly head higher. That would be a move I'll be looking at. It's very much possible. And so we look at NVIDIA. Now, NVIDIA on the daily time frame is very interesting here. The daily time frame, hopefully you guys can, really, really see this, right? If we're looking at the daily time frame on NVIDIA, we're overextended, okay? We're very overextended on NVIDIA. So are we looking at a bull trap? And not only that, now, dark cloud cover, this is I would consider this a dark cloud cover, but it's okay if you don't. I understand. It's not nowhere near this green candle, bullish candle here. It's supposed to cover at least close to 50% of the candle. This could be taken as a bearish sign. It's really up to you. It's all about perspective. But NVIDIA, again, daily time frame overextended, guys. We go down to the 4-hour time frame. Now, the 4-hour time frame, not so much overextended. So we have a little bit more upside, and I think NVIDIA is going to start heading towards 140. Okay, I do. I genuinely think NVIDIA is going to head to 140. Once that 140 target hit, by that time, I think the daily time frame is going to be extremely overextended by that point. And then SMH is probably going to be overextended, and then SOXX is going to be overextended as well. So, overall point here, okay? Overall point is that if we do get a pump, I think we're very limited. Okay, I think we're very limited in regards to upside. Now, a move to 140 on NVIDIA, that's not limited, obviously. That's a great move to the upside. But if we're talking about a pump, I think one is going to happen extremely fast. I think it's going to happen fast, and then possibly a rug pull is going to happen. Okay. After that rug pull, though, I don't think it's going to be the end. I'll make that clear. After we get that rug pull, I don't think it's going to be the end all be all. I think we're going to get one more rally, one more fat, juicy, immaculate rally. Okay, we look at Apple. Okay, let's get rid of this. And so we look at Apple daily time frame. We rejected here. We rejected here. We rejected here. And right now we're right back at this trend line. We're pretty much at this fair value gap. So we have potential to head towards about 231, 232, 233 range, somewhere around there, right? We go down to the 4-hour time frame. We're not quite overextended on Apple, but we're leaving a lot of fair value gaps to the downside in regards to Apple. I still think Apple is going to head towards 217. I told you guys originally that it was going to head towards 220. That's exactly what happened. I don't think I said it on YouTube. I think I said it in the Discord. Either way, I said it. So regardless, I think Apple is just waiting on the market. Apple doesn't have really an incentive to go higher. It's just being held hostage by the market. I think that drop is going to happen. We saw what happened when Apple went to 220s. It pretty much dragged the market with it. If it starts heading towards 217, please believe that is going to bring the market straight to hell with it. Okay, so that's what I'm looking at in regards to Apple. We go down to the 2-hour time frame. Still a little bit more room to the upside. We go down to the well, that's pretty much all we looked at. Okay, so 4-hour time frame, we're starting to head towards overextended territories. Daily time frame, we have more upside regardless on the daily time frame. If we do just so happen to head higher on Apple for whatever reason, then I will be looking at around between 231, 233, possible rejection from there. But I don't think Apple has much longer to go. I don't. Unless magical unicorn news comes out the sky for Apple, I think Apple is going to pretty much be cooked eventually. So between tomorrow and Friday, early next week, I think Apple is going to absolutely tank, and we'll see what happens with the market when that does happen. But hopefully this made sense to you guys. Hopefully it was all clear. If not, feel free to comment below how can I explain things better, how can I make it better for you guys to understand. Discord link is in the description below if you want to see how we're going to play the market from here on. Other than that, that's all I have. Thank you guys for the support. And yeah, that's all I have. Until the next video, traders, have a good one.